You're listening to episode 77 of the ESL Teaching Podcast. How to help EL students with literacy, especially as they enter US educational system in upper elementary grades or later, is an eternal question for all of us. There are so many nuances in this. For example, an EL specialist will work with those students to ensure their language acquisition process. The content area teachers need to know what and how to accommodate for English learners with beginning literacy. And literacy begins with reading appropriate level books, which are few and far between for older learners. My today's guest, Kyle Larson, and I talk about just that. How do you build students' literacy and confidence from the ground up? Kyle studied Spanish language and English linguistics at Western Oregon University, and he has a master's in teaching from Northwest University. He has taught kindergarten, high school, university, and adults in Mexico, China, Colombia, and the US. He has recently relocated from Washington State to Texas, where he teaches ELL at Frisco High School. He is also the CEO of Air Language, about which we will talk a little bit towards the end of the episode. We talk about assumptions, classroom accommodations, and most importantly, stories, how stories can help cultivate lifelong readers. I am excited to share our conversation with you, and I know it will be super valuable. And if you'd like to see us, you can watch the recording of this interview on my YouTube channel at Simply Yeva ESL. All right, let's get to the episode. Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much, Eva.
It is awesome to have you here, and I have quite a few questions ready for you, and we're going to have a short conversation. You have a vast experience, and the first question that I always ask all of my listeners is, guess what? Tell us a little bit back of your story. How did you decide to become an ELL teacher?
Well, it's a long story. I won't make it too long though.
I like long stories. That's good.
Yeah, no, I studied Spanish in high school, and that was the first thought that I wanted to be an ELL teacher, and kind of forgot about it for a long time. Went to college and started studying Spanish, and I neared the end of my my experience there, and I was like, man, I kind of need to add something else. I mean, just a Spanish major, maybe I want to add another major. So I added an English linguistics degree, and that's proved pretty invaluable, really. I got a certificate to teach English as a foreign language because I really wanted to travel around the world. So I graduated and I moved to Mexico, started teaching down there in a small private school. I came back up to the States, got my master's, and I went and taught in China, came back, taught in the university. Since then, I've taught in a couple or three different high schools in the States, two in Washington, one in Texas, and I also did a brief stint in Colombia. So, yeah, I just love language.
Yes.
Language and
Yeah. I can
linguistics.
totally relate to that. I can so relate to that. Absolutely. Very
Yeah.
nice. So you have a wide array of like knowledge of how the different cultures function, how different languages function. That is like a very big asset for an ELL teacher. It is not necessary, but it is very, very helpful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, especially the cultural understanding, just understanding what you can and can't talk about with certain students.
Yes.
Well, it opens doors,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. So what grade levels do you work with? And talk a little bit about your teaching setup, because there's always a variety of teaching setups, like do you have like a large classroom, a closet? How many students do you coach the teachers?
Yeah. So I do. Right now I'm at a high school in Texas, and I teach kind of just beyond newcomers. So these students have been here for about maybe a year or a year and a half. And I've taught, all over the board, all across the board, from those newcomers to LTELs. Do they call them LTELs in New Hampshire?
No, they don't. We just we
Yeah, long-term English
yeah,
learners.
I know. I think like we probably do, but a lot of times like we have smaller districts, so it's not even, we just say the full thing, long-term English learners,
Mhm.
as opposed to LTELs, which
Yeah, just another acronym just
yeah,
another education acronym to learn.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but also yeah, I also coach. Last year I coached social studies teachers, and this year it's going to be like mainstream English teachers.
That is awesome though, because this is one of the things that I'm looking into seeing. I want I collaborate with teachers a lot because that's just daily bread and butter, right? But just to take a small group of teachers, especially like social studies, right? That is such a topic that is, to me personally, it's very, very interesting. And I love helping English learners, access it. But at the same time, knowing, sharing the knowledge with the mainstream teachers, just saying, hey, like, this is what you can do. This is such an amazing, amazing opportunity.
I know, like you say, like the stories, the historical stories are so well. There's a lot of them are pretty fun, and it's too bad that a lot of our students it just goes right over their heads
Yes.
for one
Yeah.
reason or another.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could probably do another podcast episode just about the stories and how to present them, but we're going to stick to what we have for today, right? So
Okay.
I looked at your answers in the questionnaire, and you have such a vast experience, right? So we talked about the different cultures and everything, but what would you say is the biggest problem that the teachers encounter in general when teaching English learners?
Um, I think the biggest problem is probably a lack of a general lack in understanding of theory and maybe like classroom organization.
Hmm.
Um, if you look at, I think let's say just teachers who teach English learners here in the United States, say they're teaching content and an English learner comes in, it's really difficult for those teachers to break things down to like the basic concepts
Yeah.
because there's so much assumed knowledge
Yep.
that they right they just assume that the students know and students coming from another country oftentimes don't know who say George Washington was,
Yep.
so um, they just say it and they expect people to learn. So that's one. But the general theory has been something that I've seen across the schools I've been at. Uh, let's just say let's say there's a I don't want to say too much,
Hmm.
but as to discredit some people.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people just don't understand the basic fundamentals of what it means to teach English
Yeah.
as a language.
I
You
do
know,
believe that sometimes the I think I want to break the barrier down because I had a conversation with a science teacher while we were waiting for a meeting with a parent, and I tried to present this idea that every teacher is a language teacher, right? And I think it is so hard for people to grasp it, because when you say you're a language teacher, somehow immediately your brain goes to grammar rules, and then if you don't know the grammar rules, then it's terrible, and then essays and like all of the things that likely you didn't like in your language lessons, right? But I said, what about if you think about this? You're a science expert, right? Or a social studies expert, and you have to teach that subject, but you teach it through the medium of language, which means the language of science is not the same as, let's say, metaphors in language arts, right? So you
mhm.
have to teach the vocabulary. You have to break down the information in a way that the students are, access it. And that is what being a language teacher is. I think for a moment, I think I saw a light bulb go off. And then we had a meeting, and I don't know if it stuck, but at least I think it was like one of those little things. But I think, what you're doing and what I'm trying to do and what all of us are trying to do is to see that language learning is not a one-off, and that, like you said, the assumptions about or about the content are abundant. So let's break those down and just accommodate. And then, how can teachers accommodate? Like, for example, how can you as a high school teacher, right, accommodate for every student who walks in your classroom? Or how can you accommodate for those who enter partway through the school year, right? So what would your answer and maybe suggestion or advice be in regards to these questions?
Would you say for content teachers or for like
Both.
English
Both.
language teachers?
For English
Yeah,
language teachers and for content teachers.
yeah. I think it's really simple for content teachers, and you have to make it simple for them,
Yeah.
right? Because they're intimidated by English learners a lot of times.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think breaking it down, giving like coming up with a list of vocabulary words for content teachers, or they say sentence stems, and I don't necessarily enjoy sentence stems, but it's a pretty good way to pin knowledge
Yep.
onto the language. But I would say, well, when it comes to accommodating the different linguistic abilities in the EL classroom,
Yeah.
um, I think it's really important for all the students to get the right level of input.
Yes.
So when I do my like say I teach my adults, there are a lot of different levels in there, and we basically build up from just simple words and concepts. That's kind of how we do that. Uh, but when it comes to my own classroom, and we have to teach more academic concepts,
Mm-hmm.
I personally, it's about reading. It's 100% about reading. So um, leveled readers and individual interaction is kind of the route that I've gone to accommodate.
Finding leveled readers for high schoolers is not as easy as for elementary school, right? So you have founded a company that actually accommodates this very, very big need for EL teachers and students, right? So you are the founder, CEO of Air Language. Tell us all about what it is. I checked out your website and everything. So I want to hear, why you created it, what it offers, and how it can help the teachers.
Yeah, so I was teaching in a high school in Federal Way, Washington, and I think it's one of the most diverse places in the country. I'm pretty sure. I think I remember someone saying that. People like to say that though, so maybe it
Okay.
wasn't really true. And I was getting like a student every couple of weeks,
Oh,
a
wow.
new student from a different place. So I think I had like 8 different languages
Mhm.
at the end of the class. I think I had 8 different languages in the classroom, all different levels and different levels of knowledge and different gaps as well,
Yes,
you
absolutely.
know.
Yep.
So what one student knew, maybe that student was lower than the other student, but the other student, but that student did know what the other student didn't know. So how do you get them to share that knowledge? That was a big question. And how do you get that gap from, maybe to both students? They might both need it.
Yeah.
So basically, Air Language is a system of leveled books, and there are 4 levels, and those levels are organized by, let's say, sequence and acquisition.
Okay.
So the grammatical schema students learn as they grow in their learning of English.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so and within each level there are groups of books. So like 10 books about sports, 10
Mhm.
books about schools, 10 books about, so they're all related to different contexts, all
Mhm.
with shared vocabulary. And an air classroom is basically run like the students come in to the classroom, and for the first 15, 20, maybe 25 minutes, they take their Chromebooks out and they read these different books, all accompanied by a quiz, five-question quiz for that time. And during that time, the teacher has the freedom to pull students up to their desk and talk to them individually about the books, about what they're reading, and kind of impart a goal, or maybe collaborate with the student to come up with a reading goal.
So that is kind of like a individual conferencing, right? Or sometimes even small group conferencing, which is frequently used in elementary grades, but is not, I haven't seen it very widely used in high school setting. Maybe in reading special education reading classes, I am not entirely sure, but I know that because I've had this trouble of trying to figure out how to level those readings and how to bridge those gaps, I think you have come with a very, very interesting solution that is so useful and so helpful for so many. What about, from what I assume, does it go by topics, or so the main focus you said is the language acquisition, right? So like I would assume, I don't like to assume, but I would assume level one would have books with the verb to be and simple, like tangible nouns or action verbs, right?
Yeah, and those important verbs, like, what do they call them? The big five. I used to work in a
You
language
do
company.
have and can, well, yeah, can.
Yeah, so there are five. I don't remember. They said go, do, be,
Have,
make, and have.
yeah. I
Yeah.
can't remember either, but I know that these are the most important verbs because they're almost in every single sentence. So
Yeah. So those are in a lot of those books, but also the verbs that are important, or just the words, the
yeah,
vocabulary that's important to the context as well.
yeah. So, and how do students react to this? Like, so you've tried them with your own students, you've tried these books, and tell me, what is the students' reaction? Because, high schoolers are not an easy beast. So sometimes you have to entertain them, right? I'm like, it's not funny. This is boring, right? But,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit, like, how do they find it? How do you engage them? How's this going in the classroom?
Yeah, so sometimes, I've done this with a lot of different students, and other teachers have as well. And you got to start out small,
Yeah.
right? Um, so maybe we'll read for like 5 minutes or seven minutes, and read without stopping for 7 minutes. That's the goal for the day. And usually what I've done is, after we're finished reading, I go up to the front of the class and I say, okay, we're going to rate ourselves on a 1 to 5 scale.
Yeah.
How well did you do today? And then they have to rate themselves in front of their peers, and they don't want to be outdone.
No, of course not. Oh, awesome, cool, I did this.
Exactly. Yeah. And then every week, just kind of slowly grow the number of minutes until you get to the desired number. Also, I've found that those reading conferences, when you pull students up and you say, hey, tell me about your reading. Do you like reading? There's like the first step is just in our reading protocol is rapport building. So
Yeah.
teachers are just supposed to build rapport, and sometimes that's all a teacher can do during a reading conference.
Yeah.
Um, so once you sit down and have like an honest conversation with a student about maybe just how they feel about learning a language, what's difficult,
Yeah.
sometimes that's just enough for them to realize, oh wow, I have the power to
Yeah.
grow my language. I don't need a teacher
Yeah.
to grow my language. I can sit down, I could read these books,
Yeah.
and then what we do is we also give like a reading goal, and that shows up right on the student's interface.
Mhm.
So teacher writes maybe, oh, I'm going to read for 15 minutes 6 days this week, and you can check in with them and say, "Oh, good job, you did that." And yeah, so that's those are like these little hooks into. Yeah, we have a lot more ways to build a habit of reading there in our ebook, which people can subscribe for.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And I think I'm just so in awe of the fact that there's this solution, finally out there. So I just wanted to ask you, this sounds all wonderful. And so we have a lot of like new ELL teachers and, the beginning of the school year and everything. So what would your advice regarding accommodations and reading and teaching in general, be to new ELL teachers who are just starting out?
Okay, well, number one, I would say as a CEO of a company, I would say use air language.
Okay. Hey, that's fair. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think the real thing that you've got to consider, teachers have to consider this, and it's not encouraged by a lot of the standards that we are required to teach by. Consider what students want to learn about, the language that they need immediately.
Yes.
So we can't just sit down and say, "Oh, guess what? Ninth grade is going over metaphors. So we're going to teach about metaphors." Well, here's the hard part about that is you need the concrete knowledge in order to get to the abstract.
Yes.
And the metaphors are abstract.
Yes.
Yeah. So you got to really maybe pick and choose the standards that you'd like to teach by that will align more closely with what students need today.
Absolutely. That is like really good advice, because you're right. The high schoolers come in, some of them have never learned English and some have just a little bit, and it really is difficult to, I see them, oh my gosh, I have to read a metaphor. What is a metaphor? I don't even know how to pronounce that word, and it's, yes, what they need. So I'm a proponent of this, and this is really, really good advice. So, Kyle, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about air language? Just shoot.
Yeah. Okay, so AIR actually it is an acronym, and it stands for Advancement by Individual Reading. Okay, so our website, our landing page is AIR languagelearning.com, airlanguagelearning.com. And the actual site that the students use is airlanguage.io.
Okay.
So and it directs you from the landing page. It directs you there once you order it. So
right, and I will make sure I link the page underneath this video and underneath the podcast episode of wherever you guys are listening. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining me today and for sharing your knowledge and for sharing your wonderful product.
Thanks, Eva. I'm happy to be here.
All right, until next time. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you loved what you heard today, be sure to do two things. First, make sure to subscribe to the ESL Teaching Podcast so you don't miss an episode. And second, leave a positive review wherever you listen, on iTunes, Spotify, or any other platform. Positive reviews will improve the chances of this podcast to be discovered in the feed and help our fellow ESL, ELL teachers. And of course, there's a third thing. If you aren't following me on social media yet, come join me on Instagram at SimplyEvaESL, Facebook, SimplyEva, or connect with me on my website, simplyeva.com. Thanks again, and until next time.